Hey, Native Tongues fans, we're back with a new episode. Please take a second to hit subscribe, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It goes a long way. Let's get into it. This week on the pod, we've got a writer from the Delmarva Peninsula on the Eastern Shore. She was the winner of the prestigious Sophie Kerr Award. Since then, she has opened Saltwater Media, an independent publisher, and written 2 books, the second of which concerns the murder of her high school English teacher and mentor. Heads up, we will be discussing the murder and aspects of domestic abuse. With that, let's welcome the bright and incredibly kind Stephanie Fowler.
Maybe it's your Mac camera or something like that.
Yeah.
I look at your picture on my screen and you're so like sharp and like 4K looking.
Mhm.
Whereas I feel like I look very like grainy kind of. So I don't know if maybe it's the Mac camera.
Maybe. I'm very sharp in real life, too. And I've noticed that you are a little dull around the edges.
Noted liar right there, because I've seen you before.
Right. No one has ever said sharp in describing.
No. Oh, there she is.
Are you lying to me? Are you lying to me? Oh.
No.
Hi,
Hi there.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. We like to start every episode with us updating our
good.
calendars.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
Go. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What did you have for breakfast?
Captain Crunch.
Ah, all right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
Great cereal,
Captain
like,
Crunch.
every
Good old
day.
Captain Crunch.
So you know how everyone says like there's that one thing that they gave up, when people are like, oh, I really miss smoking or something, Junk cereals is like the one thing that I'm like, I really wish I could go back to my junk cereals.
Not a vice that would like hurt. I mean, it's not great for you, but it's not going to kill you. You can go back
I
to
don't
it.
know. My mind's made up.
Yeah. There's my friend who works with us at Saltwater. He every day eats peanut butter Captain Crunch when he comes into the office. And
Best
finally, and I had not had Captain Crunch probably since college. And one day I was like, okay, come here, let me have some of that. And then I literally the next night we went to eat at Mexican joint and there was a food line next door. I was like, I need to get some Captain Crunch. And so I've been on Captain Crunch for like a couple months now. It's like embarrassing, but it is what it is.
Nice.
Is peanut butter the one with the elephant on the box? I think like the brown box with
It
like
might
the
be.
orange
It
box.
might
I think
be.
it might be an. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Maybe I'm thinking something different.
Yeah, I don't remember an
Yeah.
elephant in the Captain Crunch lore.
He is. There is. There are elephants on the boat. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people. Real poacher, that Captain Crunch.
Yeah, not quite a Noah, right? Just the opposite of.
Right. Not to save mankind or anything, just because he likes. Apparently, they go with peanut butter.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I forgot that his slogan was "Crunchitize me," which
What?
I don't know.
That has to be
on the
new.
front of the box is it maybe it is, but I picked up the box and I was like, "Crunchitize you?" I don't think so, sir.
I don't even know.
Don't even know what that means.
Yeah, this
So
I don't know. You do the crunchitizer.
logo is not going to stick, right?
You're
Like-
the crunchitizer in this relationship. You are right. It is literally just there's no elephant. I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
I don't know.
I'm gonna look it up. Oh my god, there's an elephant on the back. I swear to God, there's a picture of him like chasing somebody in a safari thing.
Does he
He's
have one of those like
actively
old safari? Looks like a pop gun.
Yes,
It's kind of.
he's going after a guy doing that. Yes. And actually, I don't know because the elephant actually has a Captain Crunch hat on, and he's apparently been crunchitized. I believe. That's-
maybe
he's
the
been brought into the
crunchitizing.
fold.
Okay.
Yes, the
Yes.
elephant does the crunchitizing. There we go.
Yes.
Mystery
there we
solved.
go.
Does he still have
Yes.
his horns, or is the captain going after the ivory?
Yes, he's got tusks. He's got fancy ornate tusks.
okay.
They've been adorned.
All right. Well,
We've kind of derailed
Stephanie.
right from the start.
Nice to
Yes.
meet you.
Hi there.
Nice to meet you both. Thank you very much for asking me to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, gladly. Well, this is interesting. I read your book this week.
Oh.
And
Thank you.
yeah.
It's not the response. She's like, oh,
Mm.
Well,
yeah.
because
Okay.
here's the thing. I would give anything for this book to not exist.
what?
Yeah.
I know
so
where you're
the book
going
is
with
about
this,
the
but
murder.
yeah.
Yeah, the book is about the murder of my high school English teacher, and honestly, I'd give anything if it didn't exist. And it's a tough story, to talk about the murder of someone that you loved. And so, as an author,
Mhm.
it's hard for me to say, "Oh, I hope you liked my book," because it feels weird to say that. So I always just try to say thank you, and I say something, like I hope the work stands.
Yeah.
I hope the writing is okay, and I hope it stands. So, but thank you for reading.
Gladly. I was really interested in it. Let's come back to that because that's a little heavier. So we found out what you had for breakfast this morning.
Yes.
Start there.
Let's go.
You're in Salisbury right now?
Actually, my wife and I live about 3 miles inland from Fenwick Island. So I was born and raised in Salisbury, but now I live just over the state line, close to the beach.
Nice.
Yes, it's a nice life. I can't really complain.
My mom lived in Harrington, Delaware. We're actually just getting ready to sell her house. She passed away like 2 years ago, but she lived in Harrington, which is like not really close to much. Well, as state fair casinos and stuff like that, but not really. It's like an hour from the beach.
Yeah, we live like probably 5 minutes from the beach. So, it's nice until your home, until where you live gets flooded with everybody else who wants to come hang out, in your hometown. So,
right.
So it can be a little tough, when the roads turn into parking lots because everybody's trying to get to the beach and you're just trying to get to the drugstore, but that's one of the things that happens when you live where people vacation. But yeah, we live just about outside of Fenwick Island now, but born and raised in Salisbury. So Delmarva girl through and through.
So, and you run Saltwater Media out of there?
Yes. So almost about 11 years ago, my wife and I started Saltwater Media, which is it's an independent publishing company, but we're based on this self-publishing model. Mm-hmm. I've often felt like the poster child for self-publishing, from my days at Washington College. So I went to Washington College. There's my pennant back there. So Washington College, based in Chestertown, Maryland.
Went to camp there when I was a kid.
Oh, isn't it great? I love Chestertown. It's always got a special place in my heart, especially with.
Do you know Echo Hill?
Yes, I've been by there. So I've been by there a couple of times. Yeah.
That's where I spent a bunch of summers.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's beautiful country up there. It really is. And, with the Chester River, and Chestertown is such a really great, little town, historic town. And of course, Washington College being there, the first college founded in the new nation, 10th oldest college in the country. And I went there because of their writing program, and was fortunate enough to win their Sophie Kerr Prize, which is the largest undergraduate literary award in the country, and won that for a collection of short stories that I wrote during my senior year. And
what kind of short stories?
So I'm a nonfiction writer. So they were, creative nonfiction writer. So these were all stories about the Eastern Shore, Delmarva. I wrote about a ghost town down on the Eastern Shore of Virginia called Franklin City. I wrote about a couple of murders that happened down this way, one in 1940 and another in 1949 out in Crisfield. So I wrote a couple of different stories, just stories I'd heard growing up, or, different things. And I researched them and kind of repackaged them and presented them as my senior thesis, and did not think that I was going to win. There's, one of the things about Washington College is that it attracts a lot of really good writers. So I knew that my competition was pretty tough, but I was very fortunate at graduation when they said that they had chosen my work and that I was named the 2001 Sophie Kerr Prize winner. So that was pretty great.
Was that announced at graduation?
Yes. Back then, they did it back then. I know. It was pretty wild. I would say it's one of the best days of my life because, you're at graduation and, it's kind of the end moment, and all 4 years of taking every writing class I could get my hands on, every literature class that I could go to, kind of all was building me up, for this moment. And, it was kind of that moment of truth. Like, had I done the right amount of work, had I done it? And, when they announced my name, it was really incredible, because the thing that makes the prize so big is they handed me a check for $62,000. So,
whoa, wow,
yeah.
You're like, I'll put that right to the student loans. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly.
I take a check from you and I give it back to this guy right as I go across the stage.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the first things that happens is you have to pay taxes on it. So you can't pay it all up yet. So I had to pay about the lump 20. Sum. Yeah. Well, they just hand you a check. So
they don't give you an annuity. It's like $35 a week
over the year.
No, it's not like the Publishers Clearinghouse where you can get $1,000 a week for a while. No, it's all one lump sum. So paid taxes on it, and then it went in the bank. But it was a pretty wild moment. And so these were all short stories that I had written about the Eastern Shore, and I was delighted that they won. Yeah, absolutely. It's very cool. Very cool.
It's a little bit of a hat on a hat, though, right? Because you're like, I'm graduating. I'm already super happy. Like, it's a great day. We could do this like another time. Although, I guess, did you point at other people as you were going across the stage?
I was going to say, there's the gloating factor.
I win.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm joking about that. Obviously, you're not doing that, I hope, anyway. But somebody's like, oh, okay, well, I graduated, I guess, Good to see Stephanie got the award. She's a great writer. I thought I was a great writer too. Anyway.
It's a tough moment. It's a tough moment because I remember sitting there, like I was in the front row. And so I had this like fake smile plastered on. And all I could think to myself was like, be a gracious loser. Be a gracious loser. And I just plastered this fake smile. It's like, being a gracious loser, and when they said my name, I didn't really get it because I was chanting sort of in my head, like, don't cry, don't be a sore loser, like keep the game face. And then someone grabbed me and was like, that's you need to get up there. And so I just was crying. I was just crying a lot. And I remember I get up on the stage and our president was this like 89-year-old grandfather looking guy. And I'm just crying. And I was just, he's like shaking my hand. I'm like, can I have a hug? And, I just asked for a hug. Awesome. And he gave me a hug and handed me a check for $62,000. And then at that point, like all the cameras and stuff start sort of kind of filling in around the edges. And then they, as we were walking out of the procession, the PR person for Washington College kind of plucks you out of line. Now the college does it very differently. They announce like 4 or 5 finalists, and then they have like a Sophie Kerr ceremony that's separate from.
Yeah, that seems like a logical thing to do.
Yeah, back in the day, it was just like, you did all this thing and you found out at graduation, and so it made the morning of graduation very, very nerve wracking. But it was a good thing.
Seriously.
To do. Yeah,
that's awesome. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So what'd that lead to?
So the lady that had won the prize the year before me, her name is Christine Lincoln. She's an incredible fiction writer, and she was on Oprah. She had a major book deal with Random House, I believe it was, like right away. So everybody in our class was like, Oprah knows about us. We're all going to be famous. Like, we're all going to have book deals. And then I win with stories about Greenbackville, Virginia, and Chrisfield. And it's like crickets. My mom was like, you're going to meet Oprah. And I'm like, I don't think so, Mom. I don't think I'm meeting Oprah. No, not with stories like this. Right. So, I win the prize. I'm very excited. I have my 15 minutes of fame. It's very nice. And I wanted to publish the book. So I sought out, agents and editors and tried different publishing places, but I just got told no a lot. And so but I think that was good for me though.
What's it, just the commercial side? Like, obviously the writing must have been pretty good.
Yeah, well, that's what I felt. I'm like, well, it clearly has value because it just won this big award. So I felt like the stories had value. The problem was, I don't think people really knew what to do with creative nonfiction that was so regional. I think might have been the issue.
Were you willing to branch out more, or did you really want to stick to the Delmarva region?
So I really love Delmarva. I mean, I don't see myself writing stories not of this area. This is just where my family's been here for a long time. I've been born and raised here, so live here. So I really do feel like this is kind of my bread and butter, and it may never lead me to any sort of national success, but I mean, that's fine with me. I'm writing stories that I want to write, and I get to write them in the way that I want to write them. And there's a certain freedom and sort of beauty in being able to do that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I heard no a lot with the collection. And so ultimately I decided if it was going to live, I was going to have to self-publish, but I had no idea what that meant. And so this is like 2007 timeframe. And I just started stepping here. And in that process, as one might expect, I made a lot of mistakes. But sure. I randomly, kind of did a few things right. But in the process really taught me a lot and how to self-publish a book, which was something I didn't know at the beginning. And so right out of college, I was kind of working in the corporate world, and it was not very creative. And as one can imagine, I was in corporate healthcare, so that was about as exciting as it sounds. So,
wow. Yeah, sounds lovely.
Yeah, I mean, trust me, it was a
Were
ball
you reading
fun.
Policy, or did you get to write policy?
Oh, I was doing like HR work and contract work for a healthcare company. And so ultimately I just decided that it wasn't for me, and I wanted to get away from that because I was just so unhappy. And so I decided to kind of take this big chance and create a company that would help authors do what I did, but just maybe not make the mistakes that I made with my first book. So I started Saltwater Media with my wife, Patty, in Berlin, downtown Berlin, Maryland. And we did that 11 years ago. And so for the past 11 years, I've been helping other authors from Delmarva, but also clients from Colorado, California, Pennsylvania, Florida, sort of all over. Even in Belgium. I have a client in Belgium.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow. Did the pandemic kind of open that up a little bit more, just doing like the virtual thing?
Yeah, when the pandemic happened, I was a little nervous, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my publishing company in the pandemic? Because by that point, we were about 7 years old and we had a great run, just really happy with what we were doing. And what I found was people were at home like, well, I'm going to dust off this novel I started so many years ago. Well, I'm going to do my family genealogy. I've always wanted to put grandma's cookbook together. And then suddenly it was like the opposite of what I expected. I expected the pandemic, everything was going to cool down. And so I was very fortunate that we were in a position where the pandemic happened and people just started going home and writing and finishing projects. And then we actually got busier, which was a really cool thing to witness. And I feel very, very fortunate to be where we are and to have the work that I have.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense because if there's anything, I think lots of like burgeoning writers, it's the time to write. In that space, it kind of like forced your hand to be like, all right, well, guess what? You got nothing but time in your hands and you can't go anywhere. What are you going to do?
Sure, that was it. A lot of people said to me, like, I've been kicking this thing around, but then being stuck at home, I just went back to town on it. And now I'm here and I don't know what to do. And I was like, well, we're here to help.
So did you find some good gems in there? Or was it a lot of pieces that like should have been left half finished?
Here's the thing, just because we're a self-publisher, I don't take every project that comes in the door. We're very fortunate to be in a position where if someone comes to us, we try to figure out if we're a good fit for them, if they're going to be a good fit for us. And not everybody is ready. Not everybody is a good fit. So one of the first things that comes in when we have a potential client that comes in, one of the first things we do is ask them if they've been to a professional editor. Because, I can put a beautiful cover and do a wonderful layout and do all these things for them. But, the material's got to be tight. So we kind of won't take the project on until they've kind of met that first step. And then we can see what we're working with. Some people don't really know what the process is. They don't really have like an idea like, oh, I want to do this thing. So there's a lot of hand holding to kind of get them through the process. But no, we've had a ton of stuff. One of my favorites projects that we've had in terms of books that we've done was just recently we did the Jane Goodall at 90, where we were approached by some of her friends, two people that had been friends with her for quite a long time, and what they wanted to say,
were they people or were they gorillas?
They were gorillas. They got this gorilla mail. Yes.
Yeah, I think she was chimps. I think the other lady.
Yeah.
I think the other lady was.
Get your primates right, Aaron. Jesus.
Geez. All right. It's been nice talking to you.
We're talking about the Eastern Shore, so clearly the topic of primates is going to come up.
100%. You just never know where you're going on Delmarva. But a couple of her friends came to us and said, hey, she's going to be 90 on April 3rd, 2024. And we'd like to get essays, a bunch of essays, like 90 essays to be like 90 candles on a birthday cake, basically.
Oh, cool.
So they came to me and I said I could do the project. And so late last summer, we started working on it. And I'll never forget the day that I got the manuscript. And they were like, okay, we're going to send you the manuscript. Everybody's turned in their pieces. We're ready to go. And like, I'm just going through and there's like Leonardo DiCaprio has got an essay in there. Dave Matthews, Sir Brian May, Joaquin Phoenix. There was just like all these celebrities. And I was like, how I'm just sitting on my sofa in my sweatpants, and just doing laying out essays by, these famous people and all these like dignitaries from around the world and the governor of Colorado. It was a really kind of surreal experience to be this, Delmarva girl. And here I am working on this book for Jane Goodall. And then around Christmas time, we sent a proof to Jane Goodall's sister in England, and they did a Zoom call with Jane, and she got to open the book. And so I get this text message. It's a Zoom call like this, and there's Jane Goodall holding up a book that I designed and made and published, and she was very thrilled with it. She actually asked to have one photo included in it. Not every project we've done is something of that magnitude, but to have that something like that come along has been pretty awesome. And so I hope it's a mark of the good work we're doing. So I just wake up every day. I feel very fortunate to be doing the work that I'm doing, and to have the clients we have. And yeah, like I'm a book nerd that gets to go to work every day and make books. I mean,
Yeah, that's great.
living the dream.
To what extent are you involved in all this? Like, do you have anything to do with distribution? How many manuscripts are you reading also?
So when the manuscripts come in, we usually give them a pretty good breeze through. I don't sit down and do a heavy reading or content editing or anything like that. But we just want to know what kind of material it is. What are we working on? And then, we'll do a full custom interior layout, custom cover, make sure all the bits and pieces are together. Make sure it looks like a quality book that you would find on any bookshelf in any bookstore that you would walk into. In terms of distribution, we work with a company called Ingram. It's an international company. It's how my Jane Goodall book is in Korea and Belgium and UK, Scotland, Australia, Canada, all over those places. So we use Ingram as our distribution source. So when we have an author comes in and says, hey, I want my book to be available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, all these different things. Ingram is the channel through which we go through with that.
Makes sense.
So for Saltwater Media, are there like genre you guys tend to be in, or anything that you were like, all right, we lean this way, or we really don't want to go that way, or anything like that? I mean, controversial stuff probably, but you seem like a nice person, so I don't think you're trying to publish like propaganda. Maybe you are.
No. In fact, if something like really questionable came in, again, that's where we say we're probably not a good fit for this, So We've done cookbooks, we've done kids books, we've done fiction, we've done nonfiction, we've done historical stuff, kind of across the board, a lot of memoir stuff, a lot of folks where we live here on Delmarva Peninsula, there's a lot of very retirement community. So a lot of folks get to a certain age, they retire, and suddenly they want to do their genealogy, they want to write their memoir, what they did with their lives. So we get some of that coming in, people writing about history. So we really kind of cover, kind of a spectrum, but I'm not interested in any sort of hate speech kind of stuff like that. Like I said, we have to make sure the client and their work is a good fit.
Sure. Just not a lot of ultra conservative books.
No.
Right. Well, actually, I don't know. It's Delmarva. It's weird. It's a weird mix like that.
Sure.
Right? That's what I'm saying. But Eastern Shore is a weird mix like that.
It really is.
Go sort of both sides of that coin.
Yeah, I'll tell you a really quick funny story. We had an older gentleman who came in and he did his memoir, and he came in one day. Now, so I am a member of the LGBT community. I have a wife, and my friend Andrew, who works with us, he has a husband. So we are owned and operated by the LGBT community here. So this man comes in and he's working with him, and he says, now I need a section called the gays. And immediately I froze. I was like, what am I about to, what is this? Right? So I'm just sitting there very nervously. I'm like, oh, so what about them? And talk about, I couldn't even make eye contact across the room with my wife. I just stared down at my desk like, oh, what about them? And then he proceeded to tell me about how when he was younger, he thought it was terrible. But then as he's gotten older, he realized that people are people and everything's fine. And it was a little bit like, whew, but
it's a good message. Does he still refer to them as the gays?
I was going to say, he's really come a long way in appropriately addressing people.
Probably really old. Okay, he's probably like coming around. Okay, it takes him a while.
I mean, we're talking. This guy was in World War II. He's like late 90s, But he was like, I need a section called the gays, and I just froze. I was like, oh
I
Lord.
thought you were going to go with like it was like GAZE, and it was like no, he just wanted to talk about this time that he gave somebody this death stare, and it was something or other.
No, I knew exactly where he was going when he came in, and I just had to brace myself. But I think he had I think a sister whose son came out as gay, and so I think that also helped him realize, that everything's fine. There's no problems. But
they're living among us, and it's okay.
I mean, we are. We're your neighbors and your
finally
friendly.
Accepting that fact.
Right.
We are your friendly neighborhood publisher. Great. So,
that's awesome.
But he's a very nice man. He's been a client of ours for a long time, but that one moment just way caught me off guard. So it is, you never know what you're going to get some days.
Sure. Yeah. Is that something you promote for your company, that it's LGBTQ run, or is that just...
It's just who we are. It's not, I don't particularly lead with it, mostly because I feel like, my job is to help an author who has work to get that work done and to, publish it. I take very seriously that I don't necessarily have to agree with everything a client believes or ascribes to. I mean, we've had clients who are very religious. I am not. We've done work for them. So we've had clients come in that I don't feel like I have to agree with everything. I just have to help them navigate this process.
Yeah.
So I don't lead with it. I mean, certainly during Pride Month, we have our rainbow flags and that sort of thing, but those come down July 1st, but I don't particularly feel like that's what I want to lead with. I feel very much that I'm an author, I'm a writer, I'm a publisher, and I'm here to do a service for the community. And if they find that they want to work with me and we're a good fit, and I think they're a good fit for us, then, it's off to the races. So.
Yeah, that's great. I was just curious if you had gotten more business that way. I mean, you said you didn't want to pigeonhole yourself, if the gays had reached out to you, I guess.
Listen, if the gays come to,
time that when Ken was drinking.
They're welcome.
We're happy to work with the gays. We're very happy to work.
Oh gosh. That's cool. So are you laying out anything right now? Do you have any cool projects that are happening like as we speak?
Oh gosh. Well, there's
in that world.
Not necessarily of the LGBTQ community, but one of our clients who's been with us for a long time, and we absolutely adore her. Her name is Dr. Claire Small, and she was a professor at Salisbury University for like 40 years, and she taught civil rights, African American studies, American history, that sort of thing. And she has been, over the past several years, collecting biographies and stories of local important Black people from Delmarva, important parts of African American culture on Delmarva, and she's been capturing them in a series of books called Compass Points. And she's also done a book about the last Black skipjack captain on the Chesapeake, and so she's done a lot of work about the Black soldiers in the Civil War. And so she's a historian at heart. But we've done, I think, like 6 books for her. And so I really am happy that we are helping to kind of preserve some of the history of Delmarva in that way, because I think it's really important. And the work she's doing is incredible. And honestly, I just wish I had like a 10th of the knowledge in my head that she has. I mean, she's absolutely brilliant. She's a wonderful woman to work with. And so we're working on Compass Points Volume 4 right now.
Oh, cool.
So,
wow.
And, being somebody born and raised on Delmarva, I always love it when Delmarva history projects come in, because that's like, for me personally, those books always end up on my bookshelf. So
nice.
That's cool.
Yes.
So you wrote a book before Chasing Alice, right?
Yes. So the collection of short stories that won the Sophie Kerr Prize ultimately became my first book, called Crossings. And so that has, I think, 5 or 6 short stories in it. And then in 2020, I published my second book, which is called Chasing Alice. And I'm currently working on my third.
Which is?
It is called Into the Night. It is about a double homicide that happens in Salisbury in 1968. So,
wow.
Yes.
I saw on the Insta as I was stalking that you're in my old stomping grounds in Crownsville.
Yes. Oh man, that place
is intense, right?
It is very intense. Yeah, I went up a couple of weeks ago. My wife had an appointment in Annapolis, so I was like, "Hey, can we, after Trader Joe's, can we just kind of slip up the road?" Because in 1968 there was a prisoner in the jail in Salisbury, and he had a gun smuggled into the jail, and he shot and killed the jailer and shot and killed the sheriff of Wycomico County, making his escape from the jail. And that prisoner had spent 2 years at Crownsville. So in the book, I have to talk about kind of the history of Crownsville, what it was like when he was there and all that. But I really wanted to see it for myself, so that when I sit down to write, I can describe it accurately and sort of, as best I can, drop the reader into that feeling of that place, which is terrible.
It feels like old school, like not a mental hospital. It feels more like insane asylum kind of place.
It's awful.
Sort of Gothic building. It's abandoned now for like the last 10, 15 years, something like that. It's, been overrun by teenagers.
It's a tough place. And especially when you go there knowing the history, as I've been learning about that place, and then staring at these buildings and knowing what took place inside, it just hurts you. I mean, I walked away from that place and I was like, my stomach hurts, man. This is just, it was tough.
It feels like a bad place.
Very bad vibe.
Was there an ensuing manhunt after he escaped?
Yes, there was. So the prison at the time in Salisbury was located on the 4th floor of the district court building, and it was often referred to as the penthouse prison. And so he made his escape, and he got as far as Dover, Delaware before he was captured.
Wow.
Do you enjoy the research part of it? Like, is that something that you love digging into?
Oh,
This
yes.
is where my questions were going to go.
Oh, yes. Research, I will follow a rabbit hole for days. Because I write nonfiction, I have to do a fair amount of research, because if I'm going to tell a reader X, Y, and Z happened, I want to be sure that X, Y, and Z happened. I want to be sure that I'm clear. I want to be sure that I'm as correct as I can possibly be in writing these nonfiction stories. So for me, I may spend 2, 3, 4 hours on research just to get 800 words out of it. But it's important to me that the reader trusts me, that when I say something happened, they know that I've done my research. I've pored over documents. This is why I'm not high on quantity. I'd rather be high on quality in terms of a writer. I'm not going to turn out one book a year. It's never going to be me. But the one book I turn out every 4 years will be heavily researched, and I will be able to tell the reader. I want that sense of trust with the reader, that they will trust that when I'm telling them something, these are the facts as best I could possibly find them. So that's very important to me. So yes, I do a lot of research, but I also love to do the research. Driving up to Crownsville and walking around and looking at it and taking pictures, and then go home and study those pictures so I know how to describe the place. I read a massive amount of, material, constantly going to archives, libraries, talking to people, if I think that there's a nugget of information somewhere, I will track it down. I'm like a bloodhound. If I get on a scent of something, I will go until, I can't go anymore. So
Did you ever study journalism?
No, I did not study journalism. I'm sort of learning.
It's just an instinct you have.
I like to think so. It really sort of developed when I was working on the stories at Washington College, having to do a bit of research there. But then it really happened when I wrote my second book, Chasing Alice. That was where I really had to figure out how to do research and how to organize it once I got it. And, so really, I feel like a lot of the research capabilities that I've kind of walked away with were really built during the writing of my second book, Chasing Alice.
Real quick, anyone else who's listening to this may not have read it. Do you want to give the blurb real quick?
Sure, absolutely. So Chasing Alice is unfortunately the true story of the murder of my high school English teacher. Her name was Alice Davis, and she was my AP English teacher when I was at Parkside High School in 1997. And she was just a teacher that, meant a whole lot to me. She saw that I was a kid that loved to read and write, and she kind of took me under her arm and nurtured those aspirations in me. I also had some stuff going on at home, and things were not great for me, and I was really kind of struggling as a kid. And she was an adult that saw that and kind of tucked me under her wing for that as well. So she became a real mentor to me in sort of more than one way. And we kept in touch when I went off to Washington College. The night that I won the Sophie Kerr Prize, she was the first person that I called and wanted to tell that information to.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't want her to see it on the news. Like, I wanted to tell her. So I got the phone book off the fridge, and down through all the D's.
Oh my gosh.
Until I found her number and called her. And so we kept in touch. She asked me to come back and talk to her students, and then fast forward to the Labor Day weekend of 2011. She was murdered by her husband. He dumped her body in the woods near Princess Anne, Maryland. Went home, called the police, and said that she went shopping, but just didn't come home. And eventually they figured out what had happened to her. And it was something that had a very profound effect on me. Prior to, I would watch Dateline, 48 Hours, 2020, those kinds of things. And it was always very sad that it happened to someone over there. Oh, that's a terribly sad story. Yeah. But then it happened to someone that I knew and that I loved and I admired and I respected, someone who had really done some pretty important work, as, put on early on in my writing career, to put me on this trajectory. And it just had a profound effect on me in the way that I look at these stories and what I think is important about these kinds of stories. And so I sat down to write about her. And the first people that I spoke to was her family, because I felt like if her family said, "Oh God, please don't do this," then I would have just written in something and just shoved it in one of these filing cabinet drawers back here.
And they were all open to it?
Yes. Her family was open to it. She has 2 sisters, and I interviewed both of them.
Yeah.
One sister I talked to multiple times. And, I talked to her family. I talked to her friends. I talked to other students.
Taking a step back, I feel like it's so deeply personal for you.
Yeah.
To
you had to watch it unfold in real time too.
Yes.
Well, yeah. But also like then to go back, I mean, it's like to see all the sides of the story and get into like the deeper parts, even that you didn't know of her, obviously I'm sure that's a lot of the book too, is like her, who she was that you didn't
Right.
know,
Oh,
which is
yes.
cool in a way, but it's also like, I don't know, that's a really sort of muddy area.
Yeah, that was one of the things I really struggled with because when I was 17 and in her class, to me, she was perfect. She was this
Mhm.
absolutely perfect adult that had it all together. I had her on this pedestal with a bright spotlight because to me, she was, oh, this is who, an adult that has all their stuff together. This is what it looks like.
Yeah.
My mom
Yeah.
and this lady,
It
these
was
people are
so far from
perfect.
that.
And then I start to do this research and I start to learn things about her relationship with her husband and how some of these things went together. And I really struggled for a while because I was like, she wasn't perfect. And I didn't know what to do with that. And
Yeah.
I really had to come to a place where I had to say, okay, but Stephanie, no human is perfect. And so maybe what I have to do is just put her, instead of take her off the pedestal, take the spotlight off of her and just put her in the bright sunlight of day and just see her for all the wonderful qualities and beautiful parts of her, but then also the mistakes and the flaws that the rest of us have. I mean,
Mhm.
I also fell in love with the wrong guy. We've all, made poor choices or maybe not the best choice. We've all let our pride get in the way in different ways sometimes. So I had to see her as a real and full human being, as a woman, just like myself. And then I kind of came to another place where I actually think that I had a more profound love and respect and admiration for her because I wasn't just seeing this like perfect veneer. I was actually seeing her in the fullness of who she was. But that was very hard to try to, when I realized like she loved martinis, I was, clutching my pearls a little bit like Mrs. Davis drink
Right.
martinis. Like, are you
Yeah.
Wow.
the same lady that
Yeah.
was all over Shakespeare drank martinis? I remember that day I had to pick my
Right.
jaw up off the floor that day. So
Wow.
it was hard to do that, but I think the work was important to do.
What was interesting too is, it is a true crime story. Like it watched the whole thing unfold throughout the book, but it was also like a pretty, I would say this. I mean, it was like pulling back the curtains and exposing, the far reaches of domestic abuse. How that guy was just a plague upon everyone surrounding him, and how someone can get stuck in that relationship, through no fault of her own, sort of, but not really. Like she's not to blame, and
Right.
everyone around her says she's such a great person. Like, what the hell does she see in him? And she always seems to find excuses. And he's just an imposing, confrontational, manipulative person that just consumes her life, it seems like.
Yeah, and I think one of the things he was very successful at doing was isolating her from people who could have had
Yeah.
maybe more sway over her. He, in my opinion, worked very hard to make her world very small. And so, coming between her and her sisters, being a wedge between her and her family, his behaviors making it so that their friends didn't really want to have them in a party setting, but would maybe have them like, one on one when it was less embarrassing to have people
Yeah.
around him. He really worked even with his own daughter, who was Alice's stepdaughter. He even, tried to run a wedge between them. And so he very much worked to make her world very, very small. And I think that was one of the big things that I took away was, in the classroom, she had so much command, so much control. She ran that classroom very tightly, but yet in her personal life, it was very much the opposite. And so there have been people that have said to me, they felt like the classroom was actually her safe space,
Sure.
which is what
Yeah,
I
maybe.
found with her. In the classroom, she was my safe space. And so I really just hope the book stands as a tribute to an incredible woman. And, one of my motivations to write the book was I felt like her worst day became kind of the thing that people remembered, and I've thought about the bad days I've had on this planet, and I've had some pretty bad ones. And if any of those days were my Google search results, I'd be mortified, but that's
Sure.
exactly what happened to her. And so I just felt like I wanted people to know the good parts too, what she did for her students and how smart she was and how clever she was and how kind she was and how she was the one person frequently that people would confide in because they felt so safe with her, and so I
I think that all came through well.
I wonder if there's a
that'll-
certain, sorry, I was just gonna say, I wonder if there's a certain empathy that, her coming from where she was, that she was more open to it and could see things, people struggling, more because she knew the struggle kind of in her own way.
Oh, I think so. I think, one of the things I talk about in the book is that she had childhood epilepsy. And so that had a pretty serious effect on her. And you can imagine being a little kid, and the next thing you know, you wake up on the floor of your classroom and you wet yourself and you don't remember how you got there. Everything's kind of confusing, and how you might at a young age start to kind of build up some walls at that point. And she was a teacher who could see kids also building up those walls, and was able to be, because of the things she had experienced in her life, I believe that was the thing that made her recognize that in other students. And then that was also the thing
Sure.
that made her reach her hand out. And so she was pretty special that way.
It's interesting that, her life outside of her house seemed to be more definitive of her as a person. And because she did reach out, she was a very maternal figure and like a mentor to people. Seems like she was really helpful. And so all of that really comes through in the book, and it outshines the murder.
Yeah.
You can see who she was. And I don't think you just stuck to that one day.
I tried not to. I mean, I had to talk about the murder because it's the whole kind of point why the book happens. If the murder doesn't happen, there's no book, and she's at home reading Shakespeare with her 5 cats, having a martini,
Right.
So I wanted people to know the full story instead of just, terrible headlines and bad Google results, and when I would say her name to people, people would say, oh yeah, that's the teacher that got murdered, right? And I was always like, yeah, but like, that's not who she was to me or to so many of the rest of us, and so, I just wanted to do something that would perhaps stand. And the other part too, and when I was writing it, I nursed this hope deep down inside my heart that, if I write this book and maybe someone else picks up this book and reads it, and maybe they go, oh, you know what, maybe I won't get back with that ex-boyfriend who keeps calling me, or maybe I am right to be exiting this relationship with this person.
Yeah, I was going to say the other thing I took away from that was that it really came across as a warning sign. Like all those behaviors that he was exhibiting that you've talked about are the ones you just read about over and over again. It's the same person in all of those situations. And if somebody can recognize those, especially the closing her off from society, trying to create a barrier between her and everyone else.
I mean, that's like the whole One Love Foundation, like the work that we do. So what we have near Yardley Love, same idea.
Yep.
You see all the warning signs. And the company I work for, we did the escalation film, which is shown as part of their workshop. But so like millions of people have seen that.
Yeah.
But it's all showing the warning signs, and how many of the friends and bystanders, like people knew it and they saw it and they saw things and they saw the negatives, and it's just teaching the friends almost too that you have to stand up and intervene and let people know that you're there and that you see something's wrong, and that when it's wrong it can go very, very
wrong.
That
was very important to me, to include the domestic violence information and the warning signs and all that in the book, because I just not that you want to say you can make a positive out of a negative. I don't think you can do that with something like this, but I thought that if her story could just reach, like, even if it just reached one person and they made a different choice with their life, that would be huge to me. And so what has been interesting is this book's been out a few years now, and to have people, I had one lady say to me that her childhood best friend, they live in different cities now, but she said, we've often joked that she's one day going to be an episode of 48 Hours or Dateline or 2020. And she said, and then I read your book, and she said, and I just couldn't joke about it anymore. And she said, so I sent her a copy of it. She said, because she needs to see these warning signs are real warning signs, not just something that we joke about, like weird behavior, and I've had other people. I had a man buy the book for his niece because she was dating a young man that the family had some real concerns about, and he was showing some behaviors that they were not thrilled with. And so he bought the book and gave it to her and was like, just here's a little summer read for you, but to know that the book has been of value in that way has been really, really important to me.
Yeah. And, him acting like he has the answers. I knew a couple few years ago, all the warning signs are there. Nothing ever happened, and I don't think anything will happen. But I remember just hanging out with these people and thinking, that guy sucks. Like, he's a real dick. She talked about how he would comb through their finances like daily and pick apart like what she spent money on but then, not hold himself to the same standards. And then she talked about how they went to like a barbecue or something one time, and he got in a fist fight with someone. She was like, "Oh yeah, he's just a hothead." And I'm like, that doesn't happen. Like that.
It's not an 80s movie. It's not like
that's all
not
Jess
acceptable.
Davis. Yeah, that was all
No.
the kind of behavior he would do. Like he would hit on her friends, and he would make just every interaction that he had with other people, especially women. He just made everybody uncomfortable. And, it was one of those things that when I was talking to people doing the research for the book and doing interviews, there was so many people that said when she went missing, the first thing they thought was, what did he do to her?
Yeah, that seems to be. It doesn't sound like he was a smart man.
No, I would not describe him as smart. I would describe him in a weird way as like oddly charismatic. And so able to really kind of maneuver in ways that, especially men, because he was kind of a manly man, he hunted, he fished, he did taxidermy, he did, sort of very blue collar masculine jobs, so I think that, with men, he could turn on a certain charm, a certain veneer and be one of the guys, but with women, they certainly saw a very different side of him, and I guess the big regret I have is I wish Alice could have seen that with a bit more clear eyes or been able to do something different, because I sure do wish she could be with us now. And there's so many times that I would love to tell her something, and I just can't.
I think it would have taken so much more though to
I
pry
remember
that
talking
relationship
to
apart.
the middle sister that I spoke to the most for the book. Her name is Barry Tillman. And I remember in talking to her, she said, if I had known how bad it had gotten, I would have just driven over there and put her in my car and I would have driven her away. And I was like, well, that's kidnapping and you can't do that. You can't just like go to another adult's house, put him in your car and drive away with him and say, you don't live there anymore. You're going to have a new life.
Right.
I understood. Yeah, I could understand, her point, like wanting to intervene and step forward and change things. I understood that. That just wasn't in the cards there.
Sure. So Ken, when I say he wasn't very smart, but he was like imposing, leading up to that day, I think just before he went to their neighbor's house and said he was going to pave their driveway, I think, or seal their driveway. It seems like he had a different business every week. And, then the person was like, I'll get back to you. Let me know. He just like shows up the next day with the equipment and then tries to like bully her into letting him do this. And then later when he called the police, what was it, an hour after she left the house?
Yeah, he said that she had $700. She was going to go to the Walmart and stop by a friend's house. And he called after an hour of her being gone, and so I mean, immediately right away, like his story made no sense. I mean,
everyone's
right
like,
from the get-go, the police
it's
were
been
like,
an hour. She doesn't have $700. She doesn't go shopping. Like, what's going on?
Right. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
ridiculous. It was pretty obvious from the get-go. The police were super suspicious of him right from the get-go. There was no question all about that. It was just a matter of trying to dig through. I mean, also when the police show up and her purse is there, her car keys are there, her cell phone is there, her eyeglasses are there, her wallet is there, and it's like, so she went shopping at Walmart, huh? Without all of this
just
stuff,
a fistful of cash. Like, what?
It's weird. So, we just finished. There's the Peacock series, Apple's Never Fall.
I watched that.
It's a Liam Moriarty book.
Did
you watch it? Yeah. So it's kind of the opposite of that. It's like all spoiler alert, but there are 1,000 signs pointing to domestic violence, and it turns out it's just the random connections of things, and it just kind of happened out and whatever.
And that's the thing, when you're doing this kind of work, is sometimes there'll be something that seems like really ominous or like like a clue, right? And then just more research, and you're like, no, that's not even a thing. Okay, well, I got excited for a hot second there, thinking I was onto something, and I'm just not. And that's why doing the research and coming back and saying, do I have a second source for this? Do I have a third source for this? Can I confirm this in multiple ways? To make sure that you don't just have a moment where you're like, oh, I think this is a thing, and you run off with it and then turn around and you're like, oh, well, I spent all that time on that and it's nothing. So that's why, the research for me has always been really, really key, that I know what's important and I know maybe what's not so much important.
Yeah. That was the other thing that I was really curious about. So I started reading true crime books when I was way too young to be reading true crime books. And I've always been fascinated. Yeah.
You're eating Captain Crunch and reading terrible
very
murders.
So.
Everybody's got a vibe.
Yeah, I guess.
But it's the parts in between, like the news sections where, he's alone in his house or there's a conversation between two people, what length do you have to go to get in someone's head or figure out what's going on when, the cameras aren't there, like when no one's around? And how do you dig up all that information? Like I've always been interested in,
Or where do you draw the
yeah,
line?
what liberties are you taking, or, how sure of all these moments are you?
So when I wrote Crossings, I took a lot of liberties. I invented dialogue where it wasn't there.
Yeah.
I mean, right out of college, I took the creative part of creative nonfiction pretty literally. And I definitely did, invented dialogue and put myself in people's heads and that sort of thing. But then with Chasing Alice, I realized like, I can't do that because these are actually real people. And I, have to be, I don't want to say more literal, but I have to be more careful about that because, again, that issue of trust with the reader, I want to make sure that they trust me, that if I'm telling them something that I know it, or I know it as close to knowing it as possible. And that's very important to me. And I don't want to break that. So I did not do that as much with Chasing Alice. There are moments where, like, for example, the scene that I wrote in Chasing Alice where he's in the house alone
Mm-hmm.
and the police are kind of closing in on him and he starts to panic. And so in that scene, I did sort of try to put myself in what that would be. So that scene, I based a lot on conversations that I had with people who knew him and who had been talking with him in those days of her being missing. And so I knew that he was very panicky. I knew that he was very sort of like jumping from thing to thing. I knew that he was feeling trapped. I knew based on conversations that I had with the police. I did a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, and got all of the case files that the police had. So I had all the police notes. I had all the interviews that I was working with. So when I wrote that scene, I just went through every bit of research that I had and tried to, as best I could, say that this is what I anticipate was happening. Also, he had videotaped some of what he had done and in those moments. And so
it seemed like he didn't
I never saw the
videotape
videotape.
anything, though.
What?
Like he just turned a videotape on for like a minute, but like not at anything.
Yeah, it was very strange. I spoke with his daughter who actually did see the tape, and I kind of went based on her notes, and she said he was just kind of filming kind of wildly around the house and sort of kind of rambling, and it was very sort of, I don't want to say incoherent, but it was sort of this babbling kind of stream of conscious. And so I knew that moment for him was very hectic. It was very intense. It was very, like heart beating, like that feeling when you're trapped, and so in those moments where there's a scene where there's just one person, I try not to necessarily get in their head, but I try to approximate what I think that was as best I could with the research that I have done. So I feel pretty confident that I know what that was like. I've talked to people who were talking to him that day. I spoke to the people who had just dropped him off, the police officers, and read their notes and, talked with his daughter who had seen the video. So I really take a lot less creative license now than I did when I wrote Crossings, but, I tried to approximate as best I can given the research. And that's why to me, research is so important because it informs so much of the narrative in terms of what do I know? What do I think? What do I believe? And I even, and I try in places when I don't know to say, this is what I think. Perhaps it was this, maybe it was this, seems like, appeared to be, I'll sort of use words that are a bit more non-committal, perhaps, to sort of let the reader know, okay, if I say it was a blue car, I'm going to say it's a blue car. If I don't know what he was feeling, I'll say, perhaps this was what he was thinking. Perhaps this was what was going through his mind. Maybe it felt like this to this person. But I really do lean heavily on the research for that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was like detective
work. And I do try to be a lot more careful now. Yes. It very much is. It very much does feel like, amateur detective some days, but I do try to lean heavily on the research to inform the narrative. Like when I wrote Crossings, man, I just invented stuff, but that is not something that I would ever do now, but I've had 20 years to learn. So,
and he saw the space shuttle. The space shuttle went flying right over the house.
Yes.
It broke up the stillness of the morning over the Chesapeake.
Right. Exactly. Didn't that just happen in something? I was watching something where they literally called that out. Yeah.
Oh, really? No.
Under the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, Under the Bridge. And they talk about the meteor breaking up when the kids are going under the bridge,
what it was.
I believe. Yeah.
What is Under the Bridge?
Yeah, it's a series on Hulu. It's a fictionalized thing, but it's based on a true story of the murder of a teenage girl named Rena Vert.
Oh, okay.
I think it's in Canada.
Yeah, like Victoria area.
That's probably why I hadn't heard of it. I'm here in America. I don't know.
You don't pay attention to anything that happens over the
They're
border.
just a neighbor.
Can we talk about the Canadians?
They-
I would have a section on
The Canadians.
the Canadians. Yes.
Yeah,
We've had Canadians on our podcast, and they're lovely.
that is true. Actually, we had
they
a
are.
couple.
One of my good friends from college was a Canadian. So yeah.
Out Canadian, like everybody knew they were Canadian.
I mean, I would say they were Canadian citizenship with Americans, so maybe like a bi-Canadian. Okay. I don't know.
Okay, got it.
So stupid. Yes.
It was a different time. It was a different time.
I don't know.
Less accepting.
Wasn't
Yeah,
as
right.
That's
accepting.
how college was. We were just everyone was doing
exactly.
dual citizenship. It was a thing.
Right, right.
It's a phase.
Experimenting.
Right, with border crossing.
Yeah.
Right. I was
No,
a Tanzanian for a little while, and then nobody didn't really stick though.
Well, it's all about the flags,
Right,
It's
yeah.
true. It's true. So where are you with the new book?
So I'm about 61,000 words in my last count. I probably have about 40 or so more to go. My goal is to have a first draft sometime this summer. I'd really love to publish it by the end of the year. I don't know how close I'm going to get with that, but it's coming along pretty well, I'd have to say. I mean, I'm going a little slower than what I'd wanted to. I'm a bit slower at churning things out than fast. I tend to think and again, books that are research heavy, I write something and then I've got to be like, well, am I sure about this? Do I have another source? Can I verify? So, I may do a couple of hours of research just to get 800 words to 1,200 words done. And then I have to go back and just be like, okay, but did I accurately, don't want to plagiarize. So I have to read it, understand it, go back and write it, and then say, okay, well, is that an accurate retelling of what I just did? So there's a lot of push and pull, especially considering, this is a murder that happened in 1968. I don't know any of the people. With Chasing Alice, I knew Alice. I had a relationship with her. I knew so many of the people involved in it. I lived through it. I remember what that all was. With this one, 1968, I wasn't born. I don't know any of these people. And there's a lot of historical stuff to cover with it, and to make sure that I'm doing it right. So yes, about 61,000 words, bunch more to go, but I think I'll be done with it by the end of the year for sure. And then, it turns out I know a publisher.
So what's your marketing and distribution for that look like? Because even though you're writing about the specificity of the Delmarva area, these stories can really transcend that. I could see them, having national attention.
I would love national attention. I think after I won the Sophie Kerr Prize and I realized I wasn't going to be like your previous guest, a New York Times bestseller, I kind of became pretty okay with knowing that I'm a Delmarva writer. I'm going to be writing for a Delmarva audience. If success finds me, in a larger market, that's fantastic. But there are stories here on Delmarva that I think are important and deserve to be told. And I intend to tell them, and where these books go and what attention I may get or what reach I may have is sort of not always necessarily in my control. But I enjoy telling these stories. I enjoy putting them forward. I enjoy the research. I enjoy the response. I've been very fortunate that the response to my books have been really positive. And so that makes it's a nice shot in the arm,
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty comfortable with where I am and who I am and what I'm doing. And, if something were to break loose, like I had a production company that right when Chasing Alice came out, approached me about optioning that for a series. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'll entertain that. But nothing came of it. And honestly, I'm really glad it didn't, because I don't know that I could bear to see that on the screen,
I understand that.
I don't think that I would have been very comfortable with that. And plus, once that kind of thing happens, you have to turn over a lot of control to other entities, and things sometimes become not what you intended them to be.
Everyone else takes their liberties in the situation.
Right. How somebody's portrayed and that kind of thing, especially. And that's one of those things where if you're doing research, because it's an interesting story, I would say kind of like what you're doing now. It's one thing. If there's somebody that you really love and respect and know in a very deep way, that's a very different thing to say, all right, great. Now here's the great story. Go.
Unless it becomes like the next mayor of Easttown or something,
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But no, I also knew her family had turned down 48 hours and some of those other things.
I was going to ask if there was that.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't really feel that I have the right to suddenly break that barrier when they didn't want to. I'm lucky and grateful that they spoke with me and were fine with the book. So I just was like, I'm not going to push it here, you know? And there'll be other stories that may be a better fit for something like that. I think this sheriff story, this prisoner sheriff jailer story is certainly something that has wider implications. I mean, a lot of the conversations I have in the book about mental health, about the way that we, about the prison industrial system, about racial issues, a lot of the things that I'm talking about in the book are things that we're still talking about today. They were talking about them in 68, but we're talking about them in, 2024. So one of the things that I found with this book is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And that's been one of the big key points with this. If there was a book that I wrote that could have, that could reach off Delmarva, I do think it could be this one, just because of the topics that I'm covering and some of the connections. There's a lot more of Baltimore in this book, which is kind of new for me. I don't normally venture too much off the peninsula, but the prisoner who committed these murders was from Baltimore.
Okay. I was going to say venture over to the Western Shore, as some of you people say.
Yes. Over to the Western Shore. Yeah, I'm having to cross that bridge, And so he was from Baltimore. He spent time in a lot of the institutions of Baltimore, the Maryland State Training School for Boys, the Maryland Children's Center. He was at Crownsville for 2 years. He was at Clifton T. Perkins. He was at the Maryland Penitentiary. So he spent a lot of time over there. So I've had to cover a lot of those things. So that's kind of been a new thing. So there may be some Western Shore reach for this book. We'll find out.
Well, I think just the basic premise, you have a jailbreak, you have a murder, it's a true crime thing.
Oh, yeah.
There's enough there to hook people in, and then you can talk about what the bigger implications are.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, like with Chasing Alice, I could talk about domestic violence. I could talk about mental health. I could talk about alcoholism, in terms of this particular story. So instead of just beating people over the head with, like, let me just talk to you about this topic, I always feel like if you can tell people a story and kind of weave in those other things, those other topics, those other things that you're trying to hit on, I think sometimes people are more willing to listen to a story.
Yeah, sure. When I saw you were at Crownsville, there's a place I cannot remember
the Renaissance
what
Fair.
It was. I've been looking it up. No, I know what that is. And I know that happens there because you can go right from the Renaissance Fair. It's like half those people package them right up, put them right over into here. Just kidding. There's another one that's like that. That's like an abandoned facility. And my daughter plays soccer there. And it's the crazy, you drive through there and it's these Gothic buildings that are completely abandoned. And it's got the same kind of vibe. I was trying to explain to them. I'm like, it's like Crownsville. It's like being there.
Yeah. Yeah, those places are so creepy. And then, the creep factor is only enhanced when you know about the actual true horrific things that were done to people there. I mean, at Crownsville, they did lobotomies. They injected people with malaria. They injected children with hepatitis. There was shock therapy. They would put people in water for up to 24 hours. It was a terrible, terrible place to be, and not a lot happening in terms of therapy. So, you stand in front of that admissions building and it looks haunted and it looks awful. And and it's also like, then when what happened there, it's like even more so reinforced. Not that I want to have sympathy for the devil, but this guy, he was 21 when he committed this double homicide in 1968. And then I learned, about what his family life, a very dysfunctional, broken family, in and out of institutions as a little boy, in and out of, he was in Crownsville for 2 years when he was a teenager. And so you go and you say, okay, well,
what led him to this act?
Exactly. So for me, I almost sort of see, the murder as like kind of the central point, but I'm always more interested in like, okay, what happened to the different people that led them to all be there at that moment when the murder happens? And the murder happens and there's this sort of scatter shot. And then what do we learn? What changes? How does a community mourn? How does the community come together? Like, what are the sort of takeaways? And so for me, the murder is almost like a tiny inflection point, but I want to know what things were going on in the prisoner's life that led him to be there in that moment. What was going on with the sheriff that led him to be there? What were all of the circumstances that led to that moment? And then once that moment happens, then what happens after? And that tends to be what I tend to be more interested in, is the how, the why, and lessons learned.
What caused that extreme reaction in him when it could have gone a different way?
Yeah. And I think there's sort of this understanding of people, understanding of place, understanding of history and culture and context that you don't necessarily get with a newspaper article. A newspaper article is going to tell you fact, but I want to know all the background stuff. I want to know why, how did we get there? What were the things that shaped all these people? And so those tend to be the types of things that when I'm writing true crime, because I think true crime can be I think I say this in my book, that it can be very darkly voyeuristic.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think that if we're going to do this kind of stuff, if we're going to have this true crime genre, I think we owe it to the victims and the communities to do it as ethically as possible and to not be gratuitous about it and to be purposeful and say, okay, if I'm going to tell this story about this murder, why am I telling it? That's why when people say, oh, I read your book, I never was like, oh, I hope you liked it, because I don't hope people like that.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why we say, like, thank you for reading. I hope the work stands. I hope you find the writing was good.
You should just say, oh, thanks. What did you take from it?
Oh, there you go. I will say that'll be my next one. Yeah. It's like, oh, well, how well did you read my book? So I think I want to be as respectful as possible to the subject matter and to the people involved, because these are real people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's the part that has always fascinated me too. It's the voyeuristic part. It's the people. It's everything surrounding it. Because when I hear about a story, you're right. You usually just hear the surface part of the incident that happened. But the people who are truly interested, who have that, I don't know, darkly voyeuristic quality, that morbid curiosity, want to know more and get that deep dive into it. And so like, that's why I like those stories. And it's why I read these books and watch these movies.
Like, how did you get there?
It's,
I just read a thing the other day. Like 70-year-old dude killed his roommate who was like 65 and like caught him with a meat cleaver or something like that. I'm like,
you might as well just say like aliens landed in your backyard. Like it's that foreign to me.
Right. It's exactly like what leads into that? How do you end up in that?
Yeah. Space? And I think that's been one of the things that's been interesting with this new book is that when I approached doing this story about the sheriff, the jailer, and the prisoner, my grandfather was a sheriff's deputy and he was in the basement the night that it happened.
Oh.
So my grandfather was actually one of the first people on the scene. So I kind of start the book with me talking to him and getting his memory. And then the other part too is then I did the Freedom of Information Act and got all the trial transcripts. And because the prisoner pled not guilty by reason of insanity, his defense team submitted into evidence all of his psychiatric records dating back to when he was like 10 years old. And so when you have a chance to do that sort of like bird's eye view of a person, and I can see the events in his life that changed and shaped, and how there were these moments where something could have been different and it just wasn't. And you see this over and over and over, through all the psychiatric records, through prison records, through the trial transcripts, through all these things. And humans we're so complicated and we're so bizarre in our own way. And so don't we kind of owe it to ourselves to understand how people get here?
Right.
As a society, don't we want to know why people get here? Don't we sort of want to know what sort of things shape a person where this becomes a possibility?
Mm-hmm.
Had that person murdered anybody before? What were they locked up for?
He was locked up for robbery. He had threatened to kill a couple people, but hadn't. He had attempted to kill himself. He had assaulted a police officer with a car. So that could have been a murder, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so he had some sort of escalation of behaviors. I sort of describe him in the book a little bit like, in the summertime, you're watching the news and here's the weatherman comes on. They're like, oh, we've got a little disturbance off the coast of Africa right now. We'll just keep an eye on it. And then we take our eyes off of it. And the next thing we know, they're like, oh, we've got this massive hurricane and it's a category 5 and it's going to, slam into the East Coast somewhere. But what happened between that time, it was a little disturbance to when it became a category 5. Well, it had a journey, and that journey where it was fed all the wrong things. That's the thing that I kind of want to point out is like, none of this happens in a vacuum. Very few things I think spontaneously just happen. I think there's reasons and backstory and context and culture and a lot of things that go into a thing. And for me personally, as a writer, I like examining those things.
And ultimately places for intervention or something, somebody could have derailed that thing. Well, it sounds really interesting. So you said finishing up end of summer or something, talk to the publisher, I'd like wrestle with that.
Yeah, talk to a publisher. Exactly.
Get that going, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Negotiate.
Just work out that Hollywood deal. I think I'd like to have it in the hands of an editor and some beta readers before the end of the summer. That's what I would really like to have. Because I'd like to have the fall to be doing hard last minute edits and preparing it for publication. So I would love to really have this out by the end of the year because I've got another book behind this one that I'd really like to start chewing on.
Very cool. Anything you can share?
Yes, I would love to. So the next book after this sheriff story comes out in March 1931, there was a lighthouse keeper that was 12 miles out in the Chesapeake Bay in an old lighthouse. And he was found dead under very mysterious circumstances. Initially, that was ruled a homicide, and then very quickly it was ruled accidental natural causes. But this story takes place during Prohibition in the Chesapeake Bay, which is an era that I'm just fascinated with, and how the Chesapeake Bay was this highway for moonshine and illegal liquor coming in and out of the country, because, you come into Chesapeake Bay, you've got DC, Baltimore, and then all points out from there. And so there was a rum running ring that was broken up. And when one of the guys was caught, he tells the arresting officer, "We're going to do you like we did that lighthouse keeper."
Wow.
So for me, there's a lot of stuff in there to play with as a writer.
That sounds really cool.
And Ken, that's where the drink Rum Runner came from. No, I don't know.
Is that what
No idea either.
I was really hoping you're going to be like, well, I have this other idea. It's going to be the wedding of two unicorns. And there's going to be
a children's book.
Rainbow Bridge. Yes, right.
And we'll serve oysters and moonshine, at the opening. There we go. Yeah, absolutely. There we go.
No, that sounds really cool too. And I grew up in Annapolis, so anything to do with like the bay and things like that, and growing up on the water and the history there is always going to be.
Yeah, it's a cool niche.
Thank you. I kind of like it.
Okay, so let's keep the theme of Delmarva going. We usually like to wrap up knowing about where guests are from and what to do there. So if you had somebody come in from out of town to publish a book and they want to know what there is to do in the area, so you're playing tour guide, you've got them from noon till evening, what are you going to do?
Well, the first thing I'm going to recommend is to go see the ponies on Assateague. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better thing to. I mean, what's better, like, the beach and these wild ponies and, again, the history of all of those guys down there. So I think if someone came into town and they had no idea what was going on, I would say, well, you've got to ride over to Assateague. Our office is in Berlin, Maryland. And it would be like a 10-15 minute ride out to Assateague just to go look at the beautiful, it's a national park. So, number one, national park. Mm-hmm. And it's a very unusual national park. I think sometimes people think national park, they think Yosemite and, Zion and all that, mountains and all this. And this is very much as opposite as you could get, with beautiful beaches, beautiful ocean, beautiful sort of natural elements where people can hike and walk and bike, and of course see the ponies. So I would definitely recommend Assateague Island as something to do
when the wind is blowing out.
Yes. Carry some off if the winds are not correct. You might want to stop at the little surf shop and get some off there, because those mosquitoes the bugs will get you. But, Berlin itself, downtown Berlin is a beautiful historic town. They've got a ton of shops and stores and restaurants and like cool little spots. We've got public art murals and a very friendly, open little downtown area, which is just nice for a day stroll around. So
is there a restaurant specifically you would want to go to? Someplace that's like killer?
Okay, one of my favorites is the Blacksmith.
Oh.
It's right in downtown Berlin. The Blacksmith is one of our favorites. Baked Dessert Cafe. Another one of our favorites. If you've got a sweet tooth, this place will hook you up. Our friends own it, Robin Tomaselli, and she is she and her daughter Sophia. They have, just you walk in there and it's just everything you could possibly want sweet. Cupcake bombs and cookies and cakes and breads, and they had something called a croquelaire, which is basically where they took a croissant and an eclair and let them have a delicious baby. So they've got a lot going on. Yes, the peach dumplings, because Berlin is kind of known as a peach town. That's kind of their thing. And so the peach dumpling is also very good there. So.
What do they serve at Blacksmith?
Yes, at the Blacksmith, you would not go wrong ordering their double cheeseburger with a glass bottle Coke. Last year, they had something that was just so heavenly. It was a soft shell crab BLT.
Oh,
with beach fries. Yeah, it was just this giant soft shell crab sitting on beautiful tomato, lettuce, bacon, and a nice bun, tons of tartar sauce. It was fantastic.
I grew up eating soft shell crab, like but we got them like state fair style. So there was just like a patty kind of like on a sandwich. And I was just like, oh, these are good. This is fine. And then I got like the real deal. I remember going out and I think the only thing I've ever been like, I'm really weirded out by this. I don't know why, like, I don't really have a problem with it, but like mentally it's just eating every part of the crab. Cause growing up as a crab picker. Yeah. And now I'm just like, I'm just gonna eat all of that. All the stuff
that's so good though.
Don't eat this, don't eat that, throw that part off. You're like, no, I'm just gonna eat it all now.
I love a soft shell crab
'Cause
sandwich.
it doesn't have a shell. So
I
now
had
it's
some
fine to
customers
eat.
come in from out of town once, and we went out to lunch downtown, and I had them order the soft shell crab sandwich, and it came out, and they were horrified. It was like David Cronenberg had made their lunch, and they're like, "Why is there a spider on my sandwich?" You know?
Yes, exactly. So my wife is from New York.
Yeah.
Her family lives just outside of New York City. That's where she was born and raised. And so every single time I order a soft shell crab sandwich, she's like, Stephanie, I swear it looks like you're eating a tarantula. And and I'm just like
Yes.
crunching on the legs, and I'm like, oh, she's like, I can't even watch you do this, So, but I love them. I love them to bits.
They're the spiders of the sea,
Yeah.
basically. That's what a crab is. It's
Pretty
great, but
much,
they are
yeah.
literally the spiders of the sea. And if our atmosphere was different, like our spiders would all be that big too.
Oh, yeah.
Thank God they're not.
It's literally, oh God.
Absolutely.
Anyway, soft shell
Yes.
crabs.
Soft
Okay.
shell crabs. There's a couple other cool spots. A friend of mine from high school actually just opened up this really cool pizza shop in town. He's got like really wild pizzas, not just your, pepperoni and cheese, but he's got stuff with like, I don't know. He did one at near Thanksgiving that had pumpkin and sage and all kinds of stuff. So
What's it called?
Into that.
it's Captain Slice. But I think he does like the hyphen, so Captain Slice.
Okay.
So I guess we're back
Okay,
to Captain
cool.
Crunch.
I was looking for
I was
the
going
joke
to say,
there.
is it going to get crunchitized?
Delmarva, Eastern Shore,
If you
Chesapeake,
don't-
Captain Crunch, Captain Slice.
If you don't get him, he absolutely 100% has to do something with Captain Crunch on a pizza.
Yeah.
There's no reason you couldn't do it, right? If you can put
Yes.
pumpkin and arugula and all kinds of weird stuff, if you can do that, you can figure out something to do with some Captain Crunch.
It
on
has
a
to be an
pizza.
add-on
I'm
where
on
like you
it.
can crunchitize it for an extra $2 or something, right?
Oh my gosh, they could like roll the
Crunchitize
crust
me.
in it or
Oh.
something. You roll the crust and like mushed up that
There
stuff
you go.
and then bake it. And it's like,
Yes. Well, I'll give Yancey a
All right, guys,
shot.
I gotta
for
go.
this.
I'll see.
I'll tell Yancey to listen. I'll see if I can get him to make one.
I'm
Nice.
telling you, man.
Yes.
God.
Perfect.
What about so if we were gonna go out for a martini, good place for something like that. I'm not a martini drinker, but if I were
So there's a couple. There's
or
a
drink beer.
Yeah, there's a place in Berlin, 410 Social. You could probably get a very nice martini.
Thought you were going to say Burley Oak.
At the blacksmith. Oh, Burley Oak. I think so. Mostly beer, though, right?
It's all beer.
But now
Yeah, they're a brewery.
there's a distillery.
Beers are
there's
good
a
too, though.
But they do very good
Yes,
beers.
there's a distillery that just opened up. I think it's Forgotten 50. I think is the name of it. I haven't been there to check it out. The Atlantic Hotel, right in sort of our anchor piece. It's a huge historic hotel. They do a really good orange crush, which you can't beat on Delmarva at the beach. Orange crush is kind of our thing. So maybe you could give up a martini and go to the orange crush.
Yeah,
down for that.
At the Atlantic Hotel. Yeah, absolutely.
100%. That's where I would be.
Yes, there you go.
You also forgot to mention that Berlin is the home of the Runaway Bride.
Oh yes, they will not let us forget. So Runaway Bride with Richard Gere and
Julia Roberts.
Julia
right?
Roberts. There you go. Absolutely. Yes. And then
Didn't we just talk about a theme was if you were remembered only for your worst day? Like
that movie.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That movie did not age well.
No.
I think I remember like the cliff notes of that. And I feel like that's one of those ones where we like a really good, like recut the trailer
Yeah.
of it with different music and it becomes a very different movie.
Yeah,
of,
it's a
like,
stalker
you know,
film. It's a
Yeah,
stalker
stalker
slasher
movie.
film.
Right. It's a step away from Fatal
Yeah,
Attraction.
it's-
Ken,
Oh,
did you
God.
ever see the actual
Yeah.
sign? I wasn't making that up. There used to be a sign, maybe it even still is, that says Berlin, home of the Runaway Bride.
Wow.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
I'm sure it's somewhere in that town. They hold on to that like nobody's business. And they also did a Disney film called Tuck Everlasting.
Okay.
That was also done in downtown Berlin.
I didn't see a sign for that one.
No, you probably won't. No. But so there's two movies there. Everyone that's a big claim to fame. And in 2013, 2014, they won America's Coolest Small Town, and we still hold on to that one as well. But it really is a nice little town to come to. I mean, if you're, at a day at the beach and you get tired of being at the beach and you want to just see something different, Berlin is a really great little town. It's been wonderful to us as, business owner, and we've made a lot of friends there. A lot of the businesses there are really solid and owned by really cool people, and everybody's trying to do really cool stuff there. So it's a great place to have a creative business in a town that really is surrounded by creative people doing cool stuff. So feel really happy we landed there.
Yeah. And now I've got some new places to stop in when I go to the beach this summer.
Please do. Please do. Just give me a call. I'll escort you around town.
Awesome. Love it.
Yes.
All right. We've kept you long enough. We'll let you get back to your writing so that you can get that book out soon.
Yes.
Yes. No one will be happier than I will be when that one's done.
Well, thanks for joining us. It was lovely meeting you, and I'll certainly keep in touch. I'll let you know when we're in town this summer.
Yeah, please do. I'd love
with everything.
Well, thank you so much, and I'd love to see Megan again too.
Cool.
So I'll see you guys soon.
All right.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. See you.
Thanks for coming up.